So let's start. At this part, we are about in the middle of this chapter one called On Friars, right? And we're going to start in this paragraph. There were, of course, as we shall soon see. There were, of course, as we shall soon see, many other much more curious and complicated ideas in the philosophy of St. Thomas, besides this primary idea of a central common sense that is nourished by the five senses. Um, Common sense that is nourished by the four, nourished of course is fed, right, is supported, just as you give when you give nourishment to a person, right, so that the person will survive. Okay, so if Chesterton says that it's a primary idea, it's something really important, and as a matter of fact it is, right. First, let's remember that modern philosophy and modern thought, I mean, many currents, branches of modern thought, will doubt everything. We can never forget Descartes, right? That use doubt as a method. Hmm? But remember, modern physicians, right, will um, physicians will have the same idea that what we see is not what we see, right? So they will look at a table and say, "No, I'm being fooled. This is not a table. Uh, this is a gathering of I don't know, a gather of atoms, right?" Well, first of all, if you believe your senses, you don't necessarily need to disbelieve the things you cannot see, right? If you believe your senses, it doesn't mean you shouldn't believe atoms. It just means that you will not forget your senses just because there are other explanations with numbers, right? So the example of the table I gave you, you could ask this person, right? If the person looks at you and says, "Look, what you think is a table, it is actually a conglomerate of atoms." Well, you can simply look at him and say, "And what you think it's a conglomerate of atoms, it is actually a table." See, so there is this point, and there's also the point of why should something smaller be more real than something bigger? You know, what is the why is more respectable to say like that, right? Okay, so if the senses, the senses, they nourish a common sense. Common sense is not anymore this kind of idea that is going around, that it tends to be stupid because it's populist. Let's put it this way: everybody believes, and then remember, not even in English, not even in popular culture, this word, this expression doesn't sound like in Portuguese, right? Uh, Common sense is this idea of a knowledge that is common to everybody. That is a knowledge that is a base to everybody. And you get that knowledge through the senses, according to Thomas Aquinas. Something else we should take into consideration as a preparation, because of course we'll have to return to those things, is that, well, in a sense, Thomas Aquinas is a phenomenologist, right? What will a phenomenologist do. Somebody good like Merleau-Ponty. He's a pretty interesting French philosopher, much better than Sartre, by the way. And so um, he starts his philosophy looking around in the world, right? And the phenomenon, in other words, the experience is the base of his philosophy. Right? Okay. So for Thomas Aquinas, it's not just a matter of believing the five senses, as if, um, well, there is the mind doesn't play any role in discovering the world, right? So it's not like, oh, uh, I don't know, the concept of justice. I cannot experience with my eyes, with my mouth, with my hands, with my ear. I cannot experience justice. Therefore, justice is a creation. No, that's not the point. The point is, so this is extremely important. Thomas Aquinas is not accepting that we are trapped inside our minds as if everything that is important is unrelated to the outside world. He is denying this idea, but he's also denying the idea that everything we know comes from outside in the sense of we just know touch and sight and smell and things like that, right? What is he saying? He's saying that we have a common sense, we have reason, but because we are human, right? Our reason starts with the senses. So, for example, I have the basic notion of a higher purpose in life, you know, because I have the experience of high. A mountain is higher than a building, right? I have the sense of going deeper in a text because I can go deeper on the ground, you know? So the whatever it doesn't matter how spiritual our knowledge is, whatever we have, this even if it's a very spiritual and abstract idea, this is fed by our senses to bias, to explain, to give a common language, uh, for better or for worse. But there is this central common sense nourished by the five senses, right? So again, let's not go too much to one direction, just the senses, as a biologist would believe, but let's not go too much to the other uh, direction, thinking like an idealist. All right. But at this stage, the point of the story is not only that this was Thomist doctrine, but that it is truly an eminently Christian doctrine. So, this idea that you look around in the world and the truth is all around, and you can have access to the truth through your eyes and ears, right? This is a Christian idea. Well, uh, remember that Jesus would not bestow upon people an abstract feeling, but would actually create stories and very tangible stories in a way that people would remember, right? And the miracles as well. People would be able to see the miracle, experience the miracle with their own body. All right. So keep in mind, it's a common thing among religions that we deny our body completely, and we try to live completely in the spiritual world. So, for example, if you are a Buddhist monk, the more you forget your body and the more you think you are just a soul. And even more than that, the more you think you are an abstract soul that is not connected to this world, the better, right? This is not the point of, this is exactly the opposite of what Thomas Aquinas would have. For upon this point, modern writers write a great deal of nonsense and show more than their normal ingenuity in missing the point. So you have to be very smart. You have to go very far to miss this point, to misunderstanding and misunderstand this point. Well, of course, Chesterton here is being ironic, but he's not very far from the truth. Uh, let me give you an example. Um, a big question, right? Are we free or are we conditioned, right? You have to stop living and go into a room full of books, full of old books, put your hand on your chin and think deeply to think this is a great problem. To try to understand if you are conditioned or you're free. If you are in your everyday life and you are just living, you know that you are both, right? You know that you are both. You know that you were influenced by your parents, by the place you were born, by your genetics, by experiences in your childhood. You know that. You realize that you are acting a certain way or you don't like certain kind of people because of something that has happened to you in the past. But at any moment you also have this clear vision, this clear impression that you can change. You know, if you want, you don't need to follow those impulses. So, the question is there, the question is answered, right? You have to make a lot of effort. Again, stop living, lock yourself in a room, and start thinking to try to miss the point of free will, for example. Right? Having assumed without argument at the start that all emancipation must lead men away from religion and towards irreligion, they have just blankly and blindly forgotten what is the outstanding feature of the religion itself. It will be it will not be possible to conceal much longer from anybody the fact that Saint Thomas Aquinas was one of the greatest liberators of the human intellect. Remember what I told you in some classes before. We are in a moment of great optimism concerning the works of Thomas Aquinas. Everybody was reading Thomas Aquinas, everybody was discussing Thomas Aquinas. By the way, I would like to remind you that the Pope who brought Thomas Aquinas again to the intellectual scene. He used all of his power and influence to try to bring Thomas Aquinas again. And in a sense, he was very successful doing that. His name was Leo 13th. All right, Leo 13th. So remember, the just elected new pope, he was elected yesterday. He is Leo 14th. All right, so I don't know if there is going to be any effort by the part of the new pope, but it's interesting to think about that, right? So Leo 13th lived, in this turn of the century, 19th, 20th century, and now we have Leo 14th. Well, that's just a little digression. The sectarians of the 17th and 18th centuries. Oh, so remember, it's pretty understandable that Chesterton says, look, people won't be able to conceal the genius of Thomas Aquinas, right? That Thomas Aquinas was a great liberator. Because as everybody is studying Thomas Aquinas, it's a matter of time until we can discover, the kind of attack that throughout history has been thrown on Thomas Aquinas' image. And he was right. Chesterton was right, but unfortunately, enough time has passed again for we do have people who now understand again clearly Thomas Aquinas, but they are not the majority. Again, Thomas Aquinas is just this curious, peculiar guy from the Middle Ages that is really difficult to read and uses logic and things like that. Right? So, in other words, I don't know if we can be as optimistic as Chesterton. The sectarians of the 17th and 18th century were essentially obscurantists. And remember, this is a very interesting accusation Chesterton is making here, because these centuries were the enlightened centuries, right? The centuries of the light, the centuries of discovery, the centuries of denying the obscurantist heritage of Middle Ages. Remember that, right? And Chesterton is turning the table completely around here. And they guaranteed an obscurantist legend that schoolmen, remember, schoolmen is like scholars from Middle Ages, we call schoolmen, that the schoolman, Chesterton, was an obscurantist. This was wearing thin. When something is wearing thin, remember you have like a, I don't know, a blouse. It's becoming thin. It become thinner and thinner until the moment it will just tear, right? So this theory is wearing thin even in the 19th century. It will be impossible in the 20th century. It has nothing to do with the truth of their theology or his, but only with the truth of historical proportion, which begins to reappear as quarrels begin to die down. Die down. Simply as one of the facts that bulk big in history. It is true to say that Thomas was a very great man who reconciled religion with reason, who expanded it towards experimental science. This is very important for us to keep in mind. This is exactly what those people from the 19th and from the 17th and 18th century wouldn't like to admit. And this is exactly what Chesterton is admitting, very clearly here. Who insisted that the senses were the windows of the soul and that the reason had a divine right to feed upon facts. Reason had a divine right to feed upon facts. Meaning what? Meaning that some philosopher would say, how can I know the world is not fooling me? You know? How can I know whatever is around me is all an illusion? Right? Um, Thomas Aquinas will prove, right, why we shouldn't take this kind of behavior. But the point is, the world won't fool me because all the knowledge I have is from the world. Of course, I am pointing towards something much greater, but God created the world and God saw that the world was good, uh, among other things, to instruct me. So, reason has a divine right to feed upon facts, hard facts, facts from this world. Remember, the the less connected to the facts you are, the more you forget the facts, the bigger the chances that you are going to come up with some crazy theory, right? The more you get apart from the regular man, the more dangerous it is for your thought to become just crazy. Let me give you an example. A regular man on the street would get the work of the greatest painter of his time. Let's imagine a Da Vinci, right? And he would admire it. Maybe wouldn't understand it so much, so wouldn't admire it enough, but would instantly recognize that this is something beautiful, right? Nowadays, we get to the point where we have a banana stuck to the wall, right, of a museum. See, the more you get apart from the regular, everyday common sense man, the more dangerous it is that you're going to create your little universe that is going to be perverted in many cases. You know, we cannot forget something that I always like to remember: the devil in the Faust by Goethe, Mephistopheles, right? The devil. There's a sentence. He says, "It's something that has long been done to fashion little worlds within the bigger one." You know, think about it. The devil loves that. This is what the book is affirming, Goethe, when he wrote Faust. It's something that has long been done to fashion, to make little worlds within the bigger one. What do you do when you get apart from common sense? You create your little world, your little artistic world, your little philosophy, your little religion, your little concept of what is right and what is wrong. And when you do that, you are apart from the big world. In the big world, there is only one truth. And the devil hates this idea of only one truth, right? So, for the devil, it's something that has long been done, and it's so good for him to fashion little worlds within the bigger one. Right? Now, if I live in one world, I can feed upon facts. Right? And it was the business of the faith to digest the strong meat of the toughest and most practical of pagan philosophies. It is a fact, like the military strategy of Napoleon, that Aquinas was thus fighting for all that is liberal and enlightened, as compared with his rivals, or for that matter, his successors and supplanters. Of course, so why do we say supplanters? Because the later thinkers will just ignore, right? Thomas Aquinas, and they will supplant him. Well, I will open another video, so it would be better when you are watching this class.